Hello and welcome to another episode of Wake Up Africa. My name is Dr. Mumbi. How you doing? How's everything going? I really do pray that you're well in all your ways and that you are living your best life. Thanks to every single person that has subscribed to the channel. Thanks to everyone that supports us through our PayPal and our Patreon account. You know, this particular show is all about the different nuances that we need to be aware of as global Africa awakens. We need to realize what we are awakening from and kind of the circumstances that have prevented or sabotaged our awakening in the past, because we are not the first generation that has thought, that has fought and sought the total liberation of our people. We are not the first generation that has faced many seen and unseen obstacles and seen and unseen enemies, but we are in the information age. We are in the age of knowledge and wisdom where everything is being revealed. We've been told about this, the season of revelation, and that is kind of what is emerging now. And so there's so many truths that are coming out of how this matrix has managed to manipulate the whole world to basically be at the mercy of a few Western nations. So one of the things that I've noticed is this thing of who controls our narrative. I've been saying it for so long. We must be the ones that control our narrative. We must be the ones that control our dialogue, because everyone else will give a distorted version of who we are and will tell us our story, not based on truth, but based on what they want us to believe about ourselves. And this is why by the way, I'm wearing this shirt, United Front. Definitely check out my brother's African Insurrection music. Amazing, amazing, amazing revolutionary music if you need that, that kind of encouragement. But the thing is, what I've realized is Africa, we have been gaslighted before independence, since the very first time that the explorers, came to Africa and started saying they'd found barbarians and they'd found naked people who didn't know what they were doing. Since those kind of narratives came out and emerged, and throughout the colonial era, throughout the neo-colonial era, we are victims of gaslighting. And if you don't know what gaslighting is, I highly recommend that you look deeply into it, because it's something that a lot of us will find we've been victims to in our own personal lives, be it with parents, be it with family, be it with friends, husbands, wives, all those situations. And basically, let me just explain what it is. Gaslighting is basically where someone constantly feeds you a lie and constantly tells you you're inadequate, you don't know anything, you're useless, blah blah blah, like basically gaslighting you, basically just constantly feeding you this negative narrative about yourself, constantly nitpicking at everything that you're doing and kind of bringing everything that you're doing down by pointing out your inadequacies, by exaggerating your mistakes or mishaps, by downplaying your victories, and by just constantly, it's a mind game. It's like mental torture and trauma, and that is what the African people have been victims to. And one of the things, I had a conversation with an elder a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me, part of the reason that we're seeing this, this push and pull when it comes to the African liberation movement and the African restoration movement is because, the children of the independence struggle are still alive today. They saw our leaders, the leaders of the revolution get compromised. They saw, the main soldiers, like even the Mau Mau, getting killed by the presidents that then took power. They saw and witnessed all these things, and it put fear in them. They also saw how, they also grew up in that colonial era and had been kind of disconnected, but they grew up in such an environment of fear and gaslighting that they naturally, even in our DNA, passed it on to the next generation. And so the next generation fears the colonizer without really knowing why they fear the colonizer, because it's something that they have inherited intrinsically in their system of this superiority and inferiority and how, and this gaslighting idea. And we see it now with media, because media is what really perpetuates that, where media is constantly talking about how we, we're desperate, we're needed, the West has to come out and save us, we're hungry, famine is coming, drought is coming. I mean, it's just negative, 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 constantly on this cycle. And that affects our global self-esteem. Now, we have to realize that the way the world works is that we have our own free will, our own consciousness that drives our individual lives. But we are also connected to a group mind or a group consciousness, depending on our race, depending on where we live, our geographical location, etc., etc. So me as Mumbi, I will have direction on my life. But when it comes to Kenya, I become part of the group think of Kenya. And so the direction of Kenya, I can contribute my thoughts and contribute my vibration. But the overriding thought is what will determine what kind of reality we're existing in Kenya. And that's the power of group thought. So when you think about, the group consciousness of the African mind and where it is and why it's just so fractured, it's because of these, not only just the divide and conquer, but everything that could have been thrown at us has been thrown at us. And so in our group consciousness, we have fear, we have trauma, we have gaslighting, we have low self-esteem issues, we have lack of, self-belief. We have a lot of backdoor programs in our minds that kind of create this self-sabotaging experience, or kind of always have us going back to the former slave master, because we've been engineered to believe that we can't make it without them, without the colonial policies, without the neo-colonial agenda, like we can't make it. And we saw that this week with the whole tug of war between the European Union and the East African community. If you look internationally, the news was saying that the East African community is kind of, they're not cooperating with this fantastic, economic agreement. But what they're not telling you is that Africa is hesitating because it means that 82% of European Union products will come into Africa, tax-free and tariff-free, basically killing our infant, economies and our infant industries. But if we are not in control of our narrative, if we do not control what is being said, if we and from a point of understanding and a point of wisdom, we can have a lot of us feeling like, we desperately need this EU, East African deal, and our governments are letting us down by not signing it, because that's the narrative that we are being fed, and that's the narrative that the majority of us are holding on to and accepting. That's why it's so important that some way, somehow, we create a global mouthpiece, a global channel that tells our story and gives our perspective and shares our narrative. Otherwise, we've already lost the war before it's even begun, because we are in the age where, we've moved beyond, guns, germs, and steel. So as much as every nation in Africa has a military occupation from the West, they can't just come in there and override us. For now, because everyone is still concerned, everyone is still concerned about their image and how they're seen and how they're perceived. For now, like, I have to repeat that. So it's a very short season where people are still caught up in how they're perceived, but that season will not last forever. And that's why it's up upon us to take advantage of this season, to set up our own mouthpiece, to set up our own voice, to share the information from our perspective, but to really make sure that our group mind is in our control. Because right now, the African group collective consciousness is being manipulated and engineered by the West, by the people who killed our grandparents, who oppressed us, who colonized us, who enslaved us, who've just done everything wrong. And those are facts. It's not even hate speech. It's just the facts of the matter. And as much as, a lot of Caucasians reach out to me and they say, oh, Africans are lazy. Gaslighting, that's a perfect example. And, colonialism and slavery ended for so many years ago. That's 50 years. That means a child who was born at our independence is still, well, maybe now it's, 50 something years, but whatever. It still shows that we are still, that consciousness of slavery and that consciousness of colonialism is still here among us, and this white savior mentality complex and all of that. So it's really important that we move towards, through education, through information, through knowledge sharing, through spiritual sharing, we move towards reclaiming our group consciousness. I really hope that this has made sense to you. Go ahead and leave your comments. I always look forward to hearing where you're at and how you feel about the message. Until next time.
Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up.